Good afternoon to our Fundstrat and FSI subscribers. I hope you guys are all doing well today. My name is Walter Teng. I lead DeFi strategy here at Fundstrat. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Boba Networks. We're excited to be joined today by Alan Xu and Violet Abtahi from Enya Labs. By way of introduction, Alan is the co-founder and CEO of Enya. He has had previous exits in 2 distributed system startups and is the co-president of the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs Network, being a Sloan Fellow from Stanford GSB. Violet is the COO of Enya Labs and is a seasoned entrepreneur, investor, and board member herself. She has a doctorate from UMEF and an executive MBA from Stony Brook University. So to give you a little bit of background about Enya, Enya Labs is a San Francisco-based core contributor to Boba Networks. It's kind of surreal that Alan and I first met about a year ago as Boba was first launching their layer 2 for Ethereum from the Omisego airdrop. Fast forward to today, Boba Networks has grown to become a multi-chain layer 2 project with a laser focus on gaming. We're particularly excited about gaming because we believe it will be the next vertical to onboard the next billion users to crypto. For context, there are more than 2 billion gamers globally, yet about 400 million crypto users to date. We think that the key to unlocking this vertical is to create fun games that players want to play, even without the financial incentives that we see a lot of GameFi projects distributing today, whilst using blockchains as the backend. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alan and Violet.
Thank you, Walter, and hello, everyone. Thanks, Fundstrat, for having us here today. As Walter had mentioned, Enya Labs is a core contributor to Boba Networks, and who we are is we're a software company that is specialized in several areas such as distributed systems engineering, privacy-preserving computation, and blockchain application development. And I'll invite Violet to give an overview of Enya Labs, doing a little bit deeper dive before we dive into Boba Network.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be with the audience today, and thank you, Walter and Fundstrat team, for hosting us today. At Enya Labs, what we do is we excel in distributed systems engineering, application development, and privacy-preserving technologies. Our goal is to build the next generation applications that can serve the creator economy and the peer-to-peer economy for a more distributed and connected future. Why we do this is because of our firm belief and our mission to enable the widespread adoption of blockchain technologies in order to create microeconomies that can enable the larger population of the world to adopt and participate in global economy, and in order to create a more transparent and connected world with the use of these technologies. How we do it is by extending the blockchain infrastructure to the rest of the world by contributing to Boba Network, which we will talk about a little bit further in the presentation. And who we are is a team of experts on both the Web 2 and Web 3 side, with the know-how and knowledge of how these technologies work and how they can plug and play in order to support the next generation of internet, which has been referred to and we call the Internet of Value, which enables the end user to benefit just as much as the rest of the players.
So as an overview, what is Boba Network? Boba Network is a multi-chain hybrid compute platform that is built on an optimistic roll-up layer 2 architecture. Now let's break that down. There are a lot of words in that overview. So first of all, what is hybrid compute? Hybrid compute allows smart contracts to connect with the rest of the world by calling off-chain APIs. That means blockchain application developers can create smart contracts that talk to existing Web2 services for purposes such as KYC, AML, or if they wanted to check how a community member has been doing on social media and reward them with certain incentives, or if they want to create on-chain assets, digital assets that reflect changes in the state, changes in an off-chain state, such as gaming engine or how a piece of real-world asset performs, that can all be enabled by hybrid compute. And that's what Boba brings to the blockchain ecosystem as a new piece of innovation. And it is built on an optimistic rollup architecture, which enables fast and cheap transactions on layer 1 blockchains. And Boba is the first and only rollup that scales multiple layer 1 blockchains in addition to Ethereum. And you'll see the names here on the slides, including BNB, Avalanche, Moonbeam, and Phantom, and there are more layer 1 partnerships under discussions. Now, and on this chart, on the slide here, you also see a chart of cumulative transaction volumes happening across all of the different deployments of Boba across these multiple chains. And the multi-chain strategy serves a number of purposes. One, it gives developers choices. Developers that wish to take advantage of the hybrid compute protocol that's unique to Boba don't have to be forced to come to Ethereum, which is where most rollups are running on. They have multiple layer 1s and multiple ecosystems from which to choose. There are developers who have come to Boba because they like the culture and community of a particular layer 1 blockchain, and Boba allows them to do so while taking advantage of hybrid compute. And in addition to that, because hybrid compute is such a powerful capability, rather than restricting it to any one particular community of developers, it makes sense to deploy Boba onto as many layer 1s as possible so that more developers could be exposed and take advantage of hybrid compute and connect their smart contracts with the rest of the world, which we believe is what it's going to take to drive the next wave of growth for the whole blockchain ecosystem. Some of the key characteristics of the Boba network that stand out, in addition to connecting and bridging web services and real-world data to the blockchain world, is the network also uses the Boba token as a native token to pay for gas fees, in addition to the native layer 1 token. The token also acts as a governance token for the network, where token holders are able to vote for on various proposals that govern the network that have to do with protocol upgrades or major decisions around the governance of the community. And the vision for Boba is to bring hybrid compute to as many layer 1s as possible and serving as an execution layer for multiple layer 1 blockchains. As we have seen over the past 2-3 years, demand for block space has continued to increase, first kicked off by DeFi summer, a wave of DeFi applications that brought a lot of demand to Ethereum and subsequently multiple alternative layer 1s. And after that, it was the rise of NFTs. And then now what we're seeing is Web3 gaming. And in terms of gaming, the wave was initially enabled by a wave of play-to-earn games. But what we're seeing as the latest wave of gaming adoption is really driven by games that have been developed by professional game developers. These are games that are inherently entertaining and fun to play with for users, and they are coming into the Web3 blockchain world to create more economic value for their players. And they are speaking with they're interested in Boba Network and speaking with other developers who have been building on Boba because they're interested in what hybrid compute could enable for their games by connecting their gaming engines with the on-chain as what they want to do in the on-chain world, such as tradable NFTs that represent certain assets that are available in their games. And there are distinct advantages that come with Boba Network that are not being offered or not sufficiently addressed by other layer 2s. such as the ability to really easily bridge real-world data and the blockchain world in a way that programmers find really easy to do. What we're talking about is, in programming terms, atomic transactions. That means developers can make an off-chain API call, bring data back into the smart contract within one transaction. They don't have to go back and check if the data has already arrived. It's just a much easier programming model for them to adopt. And the ability to choose, for the users to choose to pay for gas, either using the Boba token or the layer 1 native token, also offers flexibility for the users and leads to a much better user experience. And the diversification of the layer 1 space from one where that is dominated by Ethereum to one where we see multiple alternative layer 1s offering different types of ecosystems, different types of applications, and optimizing for different design aspects of a blockchain has given rise to well, not only grown the ecosystem, but also given more opportunities for developers to tap into a growing user base. And by being the first and only multi-chain layer 2, Boba has been riding this wave of expansion. And let's also talk a little bit about what some of these communities are bringing to users of Boba. For example, in the case of BNB, which has a really vibrant user community, millions of active users per week, a lot of developers, especially game developers, that had been interested in tapping into that ecosystem had shied away because they felt that transactions were still a little bit too expensive for them, given the volume of transactions they generate. And they had also been looking for really compelling ways to create a Web3 gaming experience that is integral and feels native to their existing player experience. And so by combining the hybrid compute power of Boba, as well as the transaction efficiency and lower gas fees, Boba on BNB has helped a number of game developers enter that ecosystem, and in turn also helped BNB as an ecosystem, as a chain, to tap into more developers. So it's really a win-win-win situation all around between the underlying layer 1, between developers, as well as the whole Boba network. Hybrid compute being a breakthrough innovation and a unique differentiator offered by Boba, let's dig a little bit into what that really is, what that really means. And from a technology point of view, what we have done, or what we have built and created here with hybrid compute, is we have modified the block explorer to make off-chain API calls on behalf of a smart contract. And when responses come back from these off-chain API calls, whether these calls are being made to a KYC service or querying an enterprise database or to a social media API, these responses come back as call data or input data that goes back into the same transaction and recorded on the underlying layer 1 blockchain for verification and replayability afterwards. It's a seamless experience for the users and for developers to tap into off-chain APIs, tap into off-chain data, and also creates the possibility of executing more computationally complex algorithms off-chain, algorithms that are too computationally intensive to execute on-chain on a blockchain. And so if we think about the latest advances in AI, such as generative AI, these algorithms are never going to run on a blockchain itself. But does that mean these innovations are going to be cut off and out of reach from blockchain developers? Well, without hybrid compute, the answer would be yes. But hybrid compute brings the two worlds together. And that enables smart contract developers to access the latest computer science advances such as generative AI through hybrid compute. And if we zoom out, where Boba brings to the table in the whole scalability landscape is scaling this dimension of scalability that's not being addressed by anybody else, and that is computational intensity and computational scalability. All of the other scalability solutions out there in the scalability landscape today, they're focused on driving transaction costs down and improving throughput. Great goals to tackle and very much needed. But there is an additional dimension of scalability around the complexity of computation, the intensity of computation that could be performed that is not possible on native blockchain, that's not being addressed by any other network. And that's where Boba comes in to fill that gap with hybrid compute. Next, I'll turn it over to Violet to cover some of the example use cases. We've also already mentioned gaming, but there are additional use cases that are enabled by hybrid compute as well.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to dial back a little bit before we get to the use cases to further confirm what Alan was talking about on hybrid compute and how we define blockchain as a whole and the motivation behind why we decided to come up with this technology and innovation and why we thought this is important for scaling blockchain to the rest of the world, hopefully. So when we look at blockchain as a shared immutable ledger that facilitates process of recording transactions, tracking assets in business networks, sort of like an advanced database mechanism that allows information to be transparently shared within a business network. What is really interesting about it and something that is really unique about blockchain is the capability to write business logic into the smart contract and have the smart contract execute on that logic when requested and on demand. And this allows for a multitude of layers of operations and logistical issues within a company or within traditional finance sectors to now be removed, and for a much more transparent and smooth operational path with automation and clarity, which is very interesting. And we can talk about some of the use cases there. But when we looked at this incredible innovation, which is probably one of the greatest breakthroughs in the world of computer science, we looked at three different pillars, which are important, as Alan covered. How do we make the transactions cheaper? How do we ensure that the transactions can be faster? And how do we make it smarter? And what we mean by that is how do we create a world in which blockchain is not a siloed pillar of technical innovation? How do we bring it together with the past few decades of innovation that a lot of smart people have worked really hard to get there, such as AI and machine learning and breakthroughs that we have seen on that front? And for us, it was clear that not everything can be done on-chain. We need to be able to connect this on-chain and off-chain worlds together to be able to bridge them and be able to use the best of both worlds. And that's where the hybrid compute innovation came into play, which took somewhere around 8 months to build. And some of the use cases that we've been excited to work through and we look forward to innovate for further are the use cases that you can see on the slide, such as gaming. With this technology, we can enable the game developers to utilize off-chain APIs and access data and perform calculations that are related to game assets and players. On the digital identity verification, or what we refer to as DID, it's been very interesting to be able to use this for KYC solutions, right? Or we have a client and a case in which a very reputable university is working with us on creating college degree NFTs, where the NFT can speak to the college's database and confirm that this person actually graduated from this school. And that's a very simple example, right, or proof of concept for much more that can be done in that world of digital identities and proof, and lots of fraud that we have seen in the past few years in the digital world. On the supply chain management side, it's an interesting pillar because there's a lot of collaboration, multi-layer collaboration world on the supply chain world, where there needs to be transparency, data verification. We have borrower, originator, buyer. There's a lot of different parties that are playing together, and having blockchain can really remove a lot of the barriers and bring a lot of transparency and make things a lot faster and easier. And this is a problem that the supply chain world has been dealing with for quite a while now. So we're excited to see how we can support on that front. And a very interesting sector, which is very close and dear to our hearts, which is the financial services sector, is something that we are very much focused on right now, to be able to use financial services based on aggregating on-chain and off-chain data at a granular level, and leveraging some of these off-chain AI models. And there's many examples on that, which I think would be probably helpful to tap into. For example, we're talking to lenders who are leveraging the data and the distributed network to tap into on-chain lending and expanding their business, right? Traditional lenders that need to come into this new world of on-chain lending, but they need a plug to be able to get in there, and a smart contract that can talk to their databases, do a lot of verification, speak to a lot of these customers and borrowers without having to bring any of that data on-chain, or without having to know that know-how and understand the technology fully. Just plug into a service that can allow you to connect. Or for a lot of the DeFi world is interesting because when they're doing borrowing and lending, they need to do KYC, for example, to a certain level, right? Sometimes it's anonymous, sometimes it is not anonymous, but to be able to connect with the credit scores, be able to connect with financial bank statements, be able to connect with a user's ID and verify that they are where they are, or they are within the compliance metrics that they should be. This also allows the smart contract to connect with these off-chain databases and do the confirmation so that they can continue with uncollateralized lending, but with more security and peace of mind. There's many more interesting use cases when it comes to financial services that we're exploring and really excited to tap into, because we think it is going to really change that world and bring it to the next generation, which is going to be bridging CeFi and DeFi and create this next generation financial world, which can give a lot of freedom to people out there who can have more access, as well as to the financial services providers that can have more freedom and more access to users that they didn't have access to before. Alan, we can maybe go to the next slide here. This was, for the most part, covered by Alan, integrating Web 2 infrastructure into Web 3, which is the exciting part of what differentiates us, to be able to promote the interoperability of Web 2 and Web 3. So integrating the RPC endpoint into the Boba network, it creates a pathway for a transition from crypto being the cipher technology and an immutable network that empowers the crypto native and real world applications, to be able to execute prediction models on AWS, to be able to host blockchain-based games on local servers, or build comprehensive automated trade strategies, which is very interesting, again, on the financial services sector or pillar that we were talking about, unlocking and tracking off-chain commercial data to promote transparency and also smoother operations is an interesting use case as well, and empowering content creators to engage further on social media platforms. I think with the past decade or 2 decades of connected world and the virtual world, a lot of people are tapping into that creator economy, into that influencer economy, and it has become a much more connected microeconomic world that has created jobs and has created worlds that we didn't know of before. But to be able to actually track that and transparently be able to reward is going to open doors for a lot of new ideas and a lot of new businesses and a lot of new innovations to come out within the creator economy and future work, which is an important pillar that we need to all focus on. And to integrate in-person or remote luxury goods on multiple different levels again as well. These are some of the use cases that by integrating these RPC endpoints, we can help by connecting the Web 2 infrastructure into Web 3. What is next for us? This is, I would say, probably the most exciting part that we want to talk to you guys about, and we want to hear from you, and we would love to engage with as many of you as we can. We were very much focused on servicing the Boba Foundation last year and helping them build Boba Network from a technical perspective, test, understand, learn, hear from developers. And this year, what we're realizing as we have more and more conversations is that not only developers can use this incredible technology, but this is an incredible gift in a sense to the world of enterprise, because a lot of on the decentralized part of the world, they need to connect with the more traditional services in order to offer more comprehensive services to the world. And I think the Web 2 services and current enterprise models realize that they need some of these on-chain benefits of blockchain in order to run more autonomous and more automated systems in the future and be able to tap into user bases that they weren't able to access before. A huge population of the world doesn't have access to banking, and therefore they cannot access trade, for example, right? And that's a population that is untouched as a customer base that a lot of our institutional partners and enterprise partners can now connect with, given the fact that we have this infrastructure layer as a space. So we are focused on building this enterprise application layer or layers and work with a lot of you enabling the interoperability of Web 2 and Web 3 by empowering enterprise and institutional players to leverage these existing data assets and customer base as a competitive advantage in Web 3. We're looking to help and enable the CeFi players to compete for and expand to on-chain market opportunities, on-chain lending, and a lot of other opportunities that actually have been seen to be successful in the past few years. And also supporting the DeFi protocols to enter the institutional market by leveraging existing and trusted enterprise AML and KYC services. So the stage we are in, we are building this layer, and the best way that we can build something that is comprehensive and useful is by really understanding where we can help you and where the problems are that we can solve. So because we're under NDA, we cannot really name names, but we're talking to some of you now on some of these problems and trying to build these custom layers that really support you in expanding the business. And what we want to ask is for you to come and speak with us, connect with Alan, connect with myself. If you are an existing customer, if you have an existing customer base and you're building valuable data assets that you want to leverage to capture on-chain opportunities, we want to speak with you to support build that. If you're offering any web services such as AML, KYC, etc., and you would like to leverage with on-chain protocols, come and speak to us, please. And if there's a specific use case that you have thought about and it's not out there, we can build it for you because we have the capability of connecting with any API service. We have the capability of writing these business logics into these smart contracts. So we want to have these conversations. Many of you have your Web3 teams that have been doing exploration and figuring out how to do it. We would love to hear from you, see what those gaps are, and offer you our know-how and expertise in order to build these customized solutions that support you expand your business and be more successful and be more of a service to the people of the world. Because your success is our success. And if we're all successful, hopefully there's more abundance in the world. And we can support with some of the problems that we see the larger populations in remote places in the world, people facing. So excited to collaborate with you. And I think from here, we can perhaps go into Q&A, answer any questions you have. If you have comments or areas that we can focus on more and you have advice for us, we are open to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan and Violet, for the illuminating presentation on Boba Networks and the hybrid compute technology. I see we have a few questions from the audience, but before we get those answered, I wanted to ask a question for myself. Like I mentioned before, I'm very optimistic on the future on gaming on blockchains, and you have sort of shared a few projects that are working with you guys on the various layer ones that you're deployed on right now. Could you speak to a little bit more about these GameFi projects, where they're at, and some of the sort of more exciting projects that you're working with?
Sure, definitely. There are a number of game developers that have tapped into hybrid compute for tasks as simple as even generating a random number in game in a single atomic transaction, to more sophisticated usage of the protocol, such as creating NFTs that represent in-game assets that could actually change and evolve based on the latest state of gameplay in the off-chain gaming engine. And because of hybrid compute, they're able to connect the two sides together and create a more engaging player experience and make these assets more appealing. It does take a little bit longer to develop and deploy games compared to, let's say, a DeFi protocol. And these games are going to be coming online in the next couple of quarters on the various deployments of Boba, depending on which underlying ecosystem these game developers would like to tap into.
Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. I think gaming as a use case, apart from the other three that you've mentioned, makes a lot of sense to me. But let's move on to some of the questions that our crowd has. So with 2021, we've really seen these alt layer ones being Solana, Luna, and AVAX gaining prominence and sort of taking market share from Ethereum. In 2022, however, we've seen them sort of losing market share. Luna because of a faulty design mechanism, Solana with the whole FTX scandal with SBF, and AVAX still going strong, but definitely sort of losing market share to Ethereum and Ethereum rollups. So the consensus now seems to be that Ethereum L2s are here to stay. I think on a technical level, our audience is curious about what separates Boba Network from other L2s, such as the more popular ones being Optimism and Arbitrum today.
I can answer that, and Alan, you can build on that. So most of our differentiator is hybrid compute technology, which is what most of the presentation was about, right? Being able to enable to smart contract to not only enable faster and cheaper transactions, but allow the smart contract to connect with any off-chain API, right? When you can run multiple transactions off-chain and then bring the result on-chain atomically with one call, that's a revolution in the world of blockchain, right? And both on the gaming side, on the DeFi side, in multiple different verticals, that is where we are differentiating ourselves. So we are proud, and we encourage our Optimism, Arbitrum, the layer 2s that are doing an incredible job on working on the technology and expanding it and making it cheaper and faster. And we go to them, right, when needed. But our differentiator and where we put our time and where we innovate is on the hybrid compute, which we call it hybrid compute because it improves and it encourages and enables the interoperability of computation between layer 2, between Web 2 and Web 3. Alan?
No, I think you covered it really well.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? Like without the connection between Web 2 and Web 3, crypto will be kind of this cypherpunk technology that's only exclusive to, people who want to dive into it. And even after they dive into it, a lot of people are left wondering, what is the real value in this if I can't see how it impacts my day-to-day life, right? So the different verticals that you mentioned, like gaming, supply chain, finance, and identity definitely makes sense, which ties into...
That's a great point that you raised just right there, Walter. So just wanted to, underline that and emphasize it, because both Violet and I have been speaking with a lot of peers in the industry and talking about, well, what's next for our industry, right? What is it going to take to drive the next growth wave? And it has to be connecting with products and services that mainstream users are already using today, right? Connecting with what they're used to, rather than expecting all of them to jump over a chasm into this insular Web3 world that is disconnected. And in order to enable that, there has to be a way for blockchain applications to speak with the rest of the world. And that's where Boba comes in.
What I would like to add to that, and I think that kind of brings it together, is a lot of the times when we talk about blockchain, like we said earlier, we call it Internet of Value. And some of the earlier conversations, I remember in 2015, when we were talking to people, we were saying the internet was this incredible wave, but what it lacked was a currency, a native currency. Right now, what they mean by that is a transaction settlement layer that allows that peer-to-peer or that transparent layer that completes this package, right? This incredible economy that has been created, like sort of like a membrane that we didn't have before in our world. So the internet created a borderless economy on many levels where instantly we can trade, but it lacked that transaction settlement layer. And by blockchain coming in and enabling with smart contract, a lot of logic that we can write, a lot of execution that we can have. Now, unless we plug it into the stack that exists already, you cannot treat it as a siloed technology and expect it to get to mass adoption. It is solving for a specific problem. And in order for it to solve the problems of the world at a mass scale, it has to come together with the existing world, which is why we think hybrid compute is something that can respond and solve for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely agreed. I guess, being on the front line of, trying to bring this technology to Web 2, what are the main challenges that you see as builders? Like what are the biggest hurdles preventing adoption from traditional institutions or incumbents from adopting this blockchain technology into their stack, into their technology stack?
Yeah, what we have seen is that with a traditional Web3 stack that is disconnected from the existing world, meaning the existing data repositories that enterprises have built up, customer understanding, existing API services that already have proliferated the Web2 world. For an incumbent, for an enterprise to adopt a blockchain, it means they are starting from scratch, right? They either have to put some data on chain, right? And they might not feel comfortable doing, or might not be legally allowed to do so, and be forced to compete with crypto native players that are frankly more nimble, and they're leaving all of their legacy, and which means competitive advantages, these moats that have built up over the years behind and start from scratch again. And that simply doesn't make strategic sense or business sense for a lot of the incumbents. With what Boba offers through hybrid compute, that completely changes that equation, because it allows the incumbents to leave the data where they are, right? And be able to leverage them to create more personalized on-chain experience. Just take on-chain lending as an example. Because of hybrid compute now, these incumbents could actually use the off-chain data to underwrite a loan on-chain. Now, of course, there are trade-offs. If you're going to do that for a specific borrower, you need to know who they are so that you know what data to look into in your existing data lake. But if the borrower is willing to give up that piece of information with the lender in exchange for putting up much less collateral for a loan, some of them might be willing to opt for that. And that creates additional opportunities for the incumbent, and as well as additional access to capital for the borrower, right, by bringing the two sides together and aggregating the data sets.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? Like, especially with new technologies, a lot of the older incumbents who have, existing advantages within their own verticals are afraid to give up, are afraid to adopt this new technology, in fear of giving up their moat or their competitive advantage, right? Like, it still kind of boggles my mind that, like, say, for example, in finance, like trade settlement for equity takes T+2, right? So 2 days from when you execute a trade to when it is cleared by a clearinghouse. Whereas in a blockchain, it's cleared in a matter of seconds for however long it takes to confirm a block, right? So, something like that really still boggles my mind. But yeah, it makes sense that these incumbents can be afraid to adopt these new technologies. Let's see what other questions that we have from the audience. So one question that our subscribers have is that, firstly, thank you for, great presentation of Boba. The launch was great. Attracting 500 million of TVL with the Omisego airdrop. I think since launch, like the TVL, not only for Boba, but for other chains as well, has dwindled, right? With the decline in crypto prices, all across the board. TVL in dollar terms have definitely sort of declined, right? Not only for Boba, but for other chains. But can you sort of share some of the plans that Boba has on sort of reattracting and retaining TVL in the Boba ecosystem across these multiple chains that you have?
TVL definitely is a metric that we look at, but it's not the only one. And TVL is a very DeFi-focused metric. There are other metrics that speak to the traction of the network, such as new wallet addresses, transaction volume, for example, that are very meaningful to us. Ultimately, a network is relevant when there are people using it, when there are users, and the way to tell that is by looking at transaction volume, which is a metric that we pay attention to. And gaming applications, for example, they generate a lot of usage, they generate a lot of transaction volumes. They don't necessarily translate to TVL growth, but they still translate to transaction volume. And the health of a network depends on transactions, because every single transaction generates network fees, and that's what keeps the network viable. And so transaction volume is to us is an even more important metric to watch for than TVL. Doesn't mean TVL should be ignored, but it speaks to only one aspect of the growth of a network.
It completely makes sense. I think for a space as new as crypto, we're still sort of trying to figure out what are the best metrics to, gauge the success of different chains, right? It's trying to agree upon a set of metrics that can compare, say, an Optimism to Arbitrum, a Boba, ZK Sync, right? But not all of these chains necessarily have the same focus in terms of target market, target users, and given that Boba has a specific focus on bridging Web 2 to Web 3, perhaps transaction volume or developer count across these different layer ones that you're deployed on is a more relevant metric for investors and users to gauge Boba on. I think we're coming up on time with regards to the webinar. Can you share? Can you, Alan and Violet? Can you guys share what will be the best contact for subscribers to use to contact you guys if they're interested in doing so?
Absolutely. Email address would be great. My email address is violet@enya.ai and Alan's is alan@enya.ai. Happy to hear from you. Would love to have conversations, learn more, engage.
Alan and Violet, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Really appreciate the presentation of Boba and you sort of taking the time to share with us how hybrid compute can sort of bridge the Web 2 to Web 3 world.